It's Christopher Nolan time, and you know what that means. It means I am gonna rip apart this guy on his pretentiousness, like always. Yeah, if you know me, and probably you've seen it in my other vlogs when it's about Christopher Nolan movies, that I do tend to have this kind of love-hate relationship with Christopher Nolan. Granted, I like the guy. I like his some of his films. You know me. I like The Dark Knight. I like Dunkirk, and of course, Oppenheimer was actually a magnum opus that I really like. But I also tend to really hate the most pretentious movies that he does. The two of them that come into my mind is the Inception and Interstellar. So sorry, I'm one of the few guys who absolutely really don't like these movies. And the biggest thing that I do have the reason for that is that in a way of how he has this filmmaking techniques and the way and the way that most of his movie has those scripts that kind of makes him feel like he has this pretentious aura that he thinks that he's smarter than everyone else, and makes everyone feel kind of saying that, well, if you don't like his movie, you're too stupid to understand him, or something like that. Kind of vibe or something like that. It's kind of, I get kind of like this aura, and of course I get it. When you're an artist, you kind of intentionally or unintentionally have some merit of pretentiousness. I mean, I do admit that there are times that I do kind of get pretentious, intentionally or unintentionally. Although Christopher Nolan, I kind of get the feeling that he's almost like that, and almost every single thing that he ever does has this air of pretentiousness. And although I will admit that ever since I got the news that they're gonna make that he was gonna make the movie about today's subject, which is none other than the Odyssey, in my head I was like, you know what? Maybe this is something that he could do, and I was in it for it, and because the Odyssey is one of the literary books, poems, and all that stuff that is kind of a little bit of a kind of like has some cultural significance, I'll say. Many people, well, they've read it when they were in high school, and well, if you ask me, yes, I did read it on high school, but truth to be told, I kind of never paid too much attention to it. Let's say that when it's about the Odyssey, I divided myself in two parts. The first thing is when I was tasked, to read it for high school, and it kind of comes into a point where, truth to be told, I got so bored of reading it, because after a certain event of the book, I kind of lost interest, I'll say. I think that when after the Cyclops event, I kind of lost interest on it, and the other things I was like, okay, things go on, okay, then they go to these places, they meet the sirens, the witch Circe, there's Calypso, and then the final trial where he finally, where our hero Odysseus goes home, and of course he has to go through those suitors who wants to bunk his wife and all this stuff. Although those parts I just kind of skip it or skim it, and well, just went with it. Funnily enough, I think I read kind of like a Roman version, because when I read instead of Odysseus, they have the Roman name, which is Ulysses, I think it was. But I did say that I have another side of my exposure to the Odyssey, and that is by myself. And most of the story of the Odyssey, I mostly got it because I love to watch the fine arts and the paintings based on the story. I like the story. I like the stories about Greek mythology in painting and sometimes some media. And when I was a child, I really loved to go to the library and get these books of Greek mythology paintings, and I really love to skim and sometimes even read what the book inspired. What did it inspire? How this was made and all this stuff. And this is where I got my I got my hook on Greek mythology and mythology in itself. I'm more interested, watching things on in paintings. That's kind of like it's mostly the pretentiousness of my artistic views in a way. So in a way, I was optimistic to see the Odyssey. Although at the same time, when there is a name like Christopher Nolan, there's still kind of like doubts of it, because knowing Christopher Nolan, the way he film makes, he kind of tends to make movies boring, and that is because he has kind of like this slow to serious kind of progression that it just drags, and of course he really loves to make lengthy movies that it really goes on and it tends to get boring. And as time went on, then I've been hearing a lot of the controversy that is going on, and let me tell you that this is not kind of like my time and my place to speak about it. I know about the casting, but I just brush it up and say, well, I gotta watch it out of my merits. I'm not gonna go too much into details. We know about it. It's kind of complicated, let's say, but I have to watch it, with my own eyes and my merits about it. And in a way that it's kind of like a semi-anticipation that I have. I was anticipating it because, well, we're talking about Greek mythology, and I like mythologies for sort. Well, we can say that, but it kind of has this mythology, but it's also a story, kind of like this epic story that based on a poet named Homer. And at the same and also I was worried because, well, like I said, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of Christopher Nolan. He always has this pretentiousness that I'm kind of like this cautiously optimistic. So the day finally came. I decided to go. It was semi-packed, I'll say. There were people, watching it. But by the way, before I talk to you about the Odyssey, something really funny happened that is probably the biggest highlight that there is. Recently, they announced this movie called Another Mommy, or The Other Mommy, or something like that. Apparently, the trailer of the movie, it seems like it's gonna be kind of like a play on Coraline, with There's Another Mom or something like that, but that's not the thing. The thing is that before I entered the movie theater, I was watching on my phone, and I saw that trailer of The Other Mommy, and there was kind of like a specific moment on the trailer that it was, I will say, it was an effective jump scare in which we see, let's say, the monster twisting up or something like that. And then when I went to the movie theater, since I always saw, most of the time don't want to watch the trailers, I was just minding my own business, watching other stuff on my phone. And then, to my surprise, The Other Mommy trailer came on the big screen. And I was like, curious. Considering that I know what it's gonna be, and this is gonna be this is the first time that the movie theater is gonna show. I decided to turn off my headphone, and I wanted to watch the audience if someone jump. And then that moment came, and indeed it did. I think like 5 or 6 people, they jump out of their seat like, whoa! When that moment happened. I will say that was kind of like the most hilarious thing I've seen when I went to see the Odyssey. It doesn't have to do with the Odyssey. As for the movie itself, considering I know that the movie is getting kind of like a big positive out of it, although I do acknowledge that it's only getting positive because, well, everybody loves Christopher Nolan. But now that I watch it and I can say my own opinion about it, well, I will say that I liked the film. I did like. I was. It does. People kind of say that this movie is peak cinema, and I agree with it. I agree that that movie is really ambitious. It has it built up a lot, and it does feel kind of like that because because there's a lot of set piece, the cinematography, how big and larger than life, how it's built, the world building, and a lot of things in it. And this is why even common people will see it kind of like it peak cinema. So in a way, Christopher Nolan, he's basically, no offense, kind of like a master manipulator of even on the he can make kind of like even the terrible movies look amazingly great. I mean, like Inception. But okay, no offense, but I did like the movie. Although I'm also a little bit struggling to say that it's not kind of like the best movie that there is. I might probably put it on one of my top 10 best movies of the year, but there are some aspects that I can't put it on the, kind of like on the top or something like that, and that is mainly because despite the grand ambition, grandeur, and kind of like this large build-up that this movie has, it still unfortunately has some Christopher Nolan stuff that makes this movie real kind of like a chore to watch. I mean, the movie is kind of like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and some people will tolerate it because, to be fair, the movie has enough stuff, to keep you on your seat. But on the other hand, there are, of course, moments that kind of get a little bit slow, that it kind of drags on, and let's say that there are at least kind of like 13% of the movie that kind of stops being interesting, and also the narrative that it's kind of it decides to go with a non-linear kind of narrative about in which it had Odysseus telling the story of remembering his movies, remembering what he'd gone through with flashbacks, and also this combined with his son trying to look for his father, and then he goes there, and then he sees another side of the story of his father and all this stuff, and man, and I know the Odyssey is a big poem. I understand that a lot of things happen. Oh, and you'll see that the story technically cuts some aspects of it. Some in a good way, some in a, let's say in a non-interesting way. And truth to be told, there are some key elements that, to be fair, I do forgot about the whole thing. I mean, I already told you that some of the stuff that from the book that they made me read in high school, I just brushed it up. I didn't pay attention to it. Some of the details are very vague. I'm not exactly kind of like the perfect guy to tell you, okay, this is this is faithful or this is not, and I don't even give myself kind of like the time to revisit. I wasn't exactly kind of like 100% invested in order to revisit something like that. Like, for example, when I revisit He-Man, Master of the Universe, in order to watch the He-Man movie. I still didn't like too much of that He-Man movie. But either way, what can I say about the Odyssey? Well, let me try to start out without. Well, I don't think that is kind of pointless to spoil too much, because at this point, kind of people don't haven't read the book or something like that. For example, I will say that for those who doesn't know, the story is it takes place kind of like in the Greek era, in which we got our protagonist, Odysseus. He's played by Matt Damon. He basically goes to war, to the Trojan War. The Trojan War, they don't exactly tell you why it happened, but it has to do with the kidnapping of Helen of Troy. That I will give you kind of like a vague thing. He goes to war, leaving his wife and son, because the wife Penelope is their king and queen. The son is very little. And well, then you get kind of like the famous Trojan horse event, where they build this big giant wooden horse in order to fool their enemy, to bring it inside, and when they do, they attack. Perfect invasion 101, let's say. And of course, according to the story, because they didn't appease to the gods, in this case Zeus or Poseidon, and they mock him, their return home becomes basically kind of hell, almost like Gulliver's Travel. So they go to island, and basically they find hardships, especially with Ulysses, in which he had to face Cyclops, sirens, witches, how can I say, the wrath of Poseidon, to make it big. And this is basically a 10-year journey, if my memory serves correct, or an 8-year journey. I don't remember exactly. But it's a very long time until he finally reaches home, wash out, and he realizes that his home and his wife is basically stuck on this suiting campaign, in which like 30 people, they just try to marry her, but she has her heart set on Odysseus, and she's like, no thanks, I know that he's alive. And so but the other guy is like, you still want your love, and you're waiting for your love, we're gonna stay at your home and drink all your food and make banquets and all this stuff. That's the kind of thing. Let me put that a little bit in the IMDb, because there's some few names that it's gonna go over my head. I will say that I would say that there is a good semblance of acting. I'll say, and most of the acting they did a lot. Fine, I'll say. Actually, pretty solid, I'll say. Matt Damon does indeed kind of carry the movie, as well as Anne Hathaway as Penelope. I think that probably it is a combination between kind of like the main trio, the ones that makes this movie strong. Again, Matt Damon and Anne Hathaway, and the other third is actually Tom Holland as the son. It's kind of weird that, I mean, no offense to the guy, but he really looks kind of scrawny, but that kind of goes with the charm that Tom Holland had. I mean, he's basically the new this current Spider-Man. Funnily enough, in 2 weeks we're gonna get, in 1 week now, we're gonna get the new Spider-Man movie. So we're gonna get a double dosage of Tom Holland, and I'll say Tom Holland did really good on that one. Makes his physique maybe a little bit hard, but honestly, I will take his role here better than he did in Uncharted. I mean, he was really miscast in Uncharted, but in this one, he does his job, and he did a really solid performance. There were some other actors that goes into it, like for example, the main suitor and technically the main antagonist of the movie, which is Robert Pattinson. And let's say that this guy is probably the biggest chew with the scenery of the whole movie. My God, I mean, he does the job fine as this cowardly, this niggering son of a bumpkin. But my God, that there are times in which he can be a little bit cartoonish. It's almost like kind of like the villain from Titanic. That's kind of like the biggest thing that came into my head. That sometimes he can get a little bit cartoonishly villainous in a cowardly way, and he can get a little bit unintentionally hilarious. There was also the blind guy. I don't remember the name of the actor. I will address a little bit about the controversy that there was, but don't mind me, because most of the controversy that the movie had is because of the decision of the casting. I'll say, most notably, Helena Troy, played by Lupita Nyong'o, and of course, Zendaya. Of course, she's almost everywhere. But honestly, it will feel pointless because, for starters, they didn't do a bad job. Actually, Lupita Nyong'o, for the moment that she was pretty decent. She's a powerful actress, I'll say. She's really good. But man, that these two, for the controversy that they made, they're kind of like, I will address that they are kind of barely into the movie. That even talking about the controversy is kind of pointless. Pointless because they were barely in there, and honestly, their acting was pretty solid. Although I will indeed say that Zendaya, she plays at the goddess Athena, but her acting, it was, like usual, kind of bland, I'll say. She was just kind of there. She didn't kind of make it a kind of like a strikeout thing. She's not exactly kind of like one of my favorite actors. She's just kind of like just there. But maybe it's because I haven't seen her enough. I've seen her more in the Spider-Man movies. But funny thing, how funny coincidence. She's also gonna be there on the Spider-Man movie. So we're gonna have both Tom Holland and Zendaya, all of it. Although I will say that what they did to the Athena character is kind of a little bit interesting, which I'll get to that just in case. I mean, there are some other there's some other actor here and there, and let me tell you, this movie has lots of extras. I mean, I did mention that the movie can be considered peak cinema because of how much they invest in people. This, if I could say which is kind of like the biggest cast of actors there is, I will say it literally because, man, that it has a lot of people, and I am pretty sure that not many of them could be CGI, but maybe I'm fooling myself, I'll say. So this is where I go with the cinematography, that this is where it has kind of like its ups and downs. So, like I said, it has to get this grand scale with wide shot of a lot of things. Also, because Christopher Nolan is really stuck up on making things a little bit too real. It's also like having these, the lighting is very limited. In this case, like only with the sun and fire lighting the corridors. He knows where to point the camera here and there. Although there are some moments in which you can tell that they do some special effects for the animals and pretty much the dogs, I'll say. Although I will say that there is one moment that it makes me kind of like unintentionally laugh, in which it's almost at the beginning of the movie in which they were picking up, ducks, and they find a runt and they drop it from a cliff. That was like, holy frick, no. That was like, again, it was kind of like unintentionally hilarious, but at the same time cruel. Well, what do you do? I think that's what the Greeks did. But anyway, although a lot of the special effects, they kind of do work, and I will say that there are moments in which, okay, well, let me go a little bit with the pros and cons when it happens, I'll say. For example, when the movie goes pro is when things get kind of a little bit disturbing in a way. For example, in the original story, and even in this movie, we got the moment in which the soldier reaches the island where Circe lives. Circe is a witch, and basically she feeds them laced food, and then she transforms all of them except for her dishes into pigs. And I gotta say that the transformation scene of the soldier into pigs is really disturbing. This was one of the most disturbing transformation sequences that I have seen. Of course, that there are moments in which it kind of itself cheats by having kind of like the editing in which they have a character in the middle and then the camera pans from one side to another, in which one side is fine and then the other, then it transforms and all this stuff. But there are kind of like moments in which you see her kind of molding the character face like it is freaking clay, like making like this, and looking at how it transforms is disturbing. It's even more disturbing than any Wolfman movie that I have seen. Although considering that I have never seen what was it? American Werewolf in London. I haven't seen that one, but I know that people talk about the transformation sequence like that. That's how disturbing it is, and then of course the moment that I did wanted to watch is, for example, is the Cyclops. For me, for the Odyssey, the biggest highlight that I have is always the Cyclops. And well, this one doesn't disappoint. It doesn't disappoint. By the way, the Cyclops is I think it was named Polyphemus or something like that. And from what I remember, it goes a little bit half faithful, because in this case they don't have the infamous dialogue in which they make the Cyclops drunk, and then when he talks to Ulysses, it's like, hey, what's your name? Nobody. Oh, nobody. Nobody's gonna be eaten last. And when he gets blinded and when everyone escapes, he just screams, "Nobody blind me! Nobody just escape." Granted, for Christopher Nolan, I think that was gonna be a little bit silly, even though they made him speak something that it was kind of like an excuse, and because after that they were like, yeah, he speaks. Can we reason with him? That ship sailed long ago. Let's go. Ah, man. But then there are moments in which the cinematography or the practical effects can go a little bit disappointing. This is the other side that I go. I would say that there were a few moments in which the armory kind of feels a little bit tacky. They're kind of, I swear, they're kind of like the big general from the army. He has is bulky, yeah, but he kind of looks like a Final Fantasy character. And then they go to an island where they have kind of like these big armorer guys. Armor made of kind of like this white armor, and boy, that the the first one wearing that kind of armor, for some reason, it kind of reminded me they're like Michelin Man for some reason. But maybe that's just me. But probably the worst special effect I've seen is when when everyone escapes from a whirlpool, and then apparently there's kind of like this creature that is hidden on a rock, and it starts eating all these soldiers. But the creature, I don't even know what it was. It didn't feel like it had a face, so I can't say if it's a hydra or it's an animal or something like that. But the special effect of that thing was so hideous that I couldn't believe what it was. I don't know. I couldn't see if it was I don't know if it was tentacles but somehow I don't know what to say. It was. What's the best way I can describe it? It's almost like something kind of like plasticky or something like that, or something like a carburetor of a car. But it started kind of like eating people, and I couldn't even know what it was. I don't even remember if that's something that happened on the book or something like that. Because if it's a hydra or a sea serpent, I don't buy it. And this is where I will also say that there are also some parts in which Christopher Nolan also falters on the camera, because once in a while the camera does feel a little bit shaky and sometimes has all these cuts that it kind of leaves you confused, and that is because the editing, they want to make you go with, okay, this is a non-linear story. We're gonna see part of what's happened in the present, and then we see all these flashbacks, and well, it does take some time to get used to. So I got used to it, but again, at the end, then later, again, the tone kind of gets boring, but it's mostly when they jumped into, okay, this is when they start talking about their past, and I was like, maybe that doesn't center a little bit too much. At least, I mean, I can get the kind of emotion that I wanted to do, but I don't know that it's something felt something kind of like held me back on that. And again, I'm not exactly criticizing for the main of criticizing, because at the end of the day, I like the movie fine. It's just that I was something felt kind of like lacking, and it's mostly because I do notice that still Christopher Nolan and his style is very Christopher Nolan-ski. And by the way, the camera falters, especially during the climax and during the final act, I'll say. And just in case, because the other problem that I can find with the movie is that for a 2-hour and 48 movie, then considering my bias on Christopher Nolan, this movie can guarantee that it can be a chore. It's exhausting. It can be exhausting. Oh wait, I did say that. Sorry, in my mind sometimes wonder, but I did say that it can get exhausting. There were times, especially because the movie has this kind of pacing that we got the people telling the stories. We see the flashbacks, which it has all these intense stuff. And by the way, if you're kind of excited to see the sirens, don't be. You're not gonna see a lick of the sirens. No sirens. And this is where I'm gonna talk about how this movie goes into the typical Christopher Nolan pretentious area, because the movie wanted to play out a little bit too seriously on the theme, in which you're not gonna see too much about the gods. they talk about the law of suitors, the tribute to Poseidon, and all these things, and basically the movie it kind of turns into this war can wash up some people. In the case of Ulysses, he went to war. He has at least two memento from people that he cared. One from his wife Penelope, who he has this small statue of Athena, and also he got kind of like this stick because the drafting is always taken by the drawing of the kind of like the drawing of the sticks, I'll say, kind of like a lottery. And then when our main antagonist he was gonna get drafted, he basically exchanges with one scrawny shepherd, let's say, and then the I think his name was Sutra or something like that. I don't remember exactly. It's just this poor guy who basically gets killed while giving the enemy the Trojan horse. By the way, I know that being inside the Trojan horse was no easy task, but the way the Trojan horse was modeled, it was kind of like the most inconvenient one there is, and probably I don't know if I wanna praise or smack Christopher Nolan on being creative on that one, because most of the time I've seen stories like the Trojan horse being on his 4 legs, but this Trojan horse, I think it was kind of smaller compared from what I can imagine, and it is a horse standing on its hind legs, and it also comes up as a little bit unintentionally funny when they begin to poke the horse with the sword, and they almost missed them, except for one that it goes that it like oh. Okay, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, a little bit of the thematic of the scene. Oh yeah, you know what? Before I remember, this movie is rated R, but yeah, there's some stuff that it doesn't serve as rated R, but actually I think this movie is more PG-13 because there's the slashing and all the stuff, but there wasn't enough blood to go like or something like that. Okay, returning about the thematic of the movie, they really wanted to showcase that war sucks. It washes up people even when returning home, that they have kind of like this PTSD kind of thing, or sometimes they return not being kind of like the same person, and of course their decisions basically makes you lose your comrades little by little because of your decisions and all that stuff. And by the way, I did mention about the Zendaya as Athena kind of thing. And for the movie that it wanted to showcase a little bit unrealistic things, that kind of makes the whole narrative a little bit unreliable. Because, we did saw a Cyclops and also a whirlpool that comes out of nowhere that looks unnatural. And then kind of like this intestine-looking monster that grabs other people, and there's also the witches, and of course we don't see the siren. So I don't know. Probably in the Christopher Nolan they wanted to play out that these are kind of like exaggeration from people or something like that. And that is mostly showcasing because of Athena. And this is where the pretentiousness of the Christopher Nolan showcase. And because we're almost during the whole movie in some points, Odysseus is talking with Athena, and he treats her like she is his imaginary friend. And in a ways, I was like, okay, I can get that. But then at the end of the movie, it kind of showcased like, okay, this is where the pretentiousness is. I think this thing a lot of times in other movies. I mean, I can accept it for the theme that it is. I'm not gonna lie, for its pretentiousness, it was a little bit clever, I'm gonna say. There's a little bit in your head, not gonna lie, it's a little bit in your head that the whole, when it's revealed the real identity of Athena as an imaginary friend. But again, that kind of comes into conflict about what we've seen. I mean, from a story in which we have the Cyclops and all this stuff. And yeah, it has also the kind of like the scene that about your love for someone is very powerful because of the Penelope's insistence of being faithful to her husband, and of course the journey home and all that stuff, and so yeah, that's technically what there is, and of course we got, when finally this journey ends, then we got the final moment in which that one takes like I think 25 more minutes of it, and it does feel kind of like a drag, I'll say, because it was like, there's still more movie, I'll say. Although a lot of movies tend to do stuff like that, I'm now used to it. And then of course we got the ending. I don't exactly remember how it ends. And when the movie ended, normally I will hear people clapping about this movie, but I'm surprised that no one did. Everyone was like quiet, and maybe, and I did kind of hear that it was like, okay, it was okay, I like it, but kind of tend to be boring or something like that. Yeah, this is the typical Christopher Nolan movie that is an immense spectacle. Yes, it's peak cinema. It looks great. It's amazing and all this stuff. But let's not forget that it's still pretentious, and it kind of tends to be boring. Like some intellectual guy that he's interesting, but there are times that he gets a little bit too much that I was like, okay. So yeah, I do. That doesn't mean that I regret watching the movie. I actually had a nice time. I do agree that I enjoyed the spectacle, the grandness, and I praise the ambition that this movie had. It is good for what it is. For Christopher Nolan, I'll give him a pat on the back with that on doing it. Kind of like a decent movie at best. I know that there are people who might not gonna like this movie as much as, well, some other people do. I understand. It's none of my business. I always go a little bit open-minded with that, and I could say that I can understand the middle of the road that could go with it. I like this movie fine. That if I could give it a score, I could give it kind of like an 8 out of 10, at least from my opinion. But maybe if I'm a little bit too generous with Christopher Nolan, maybe I'll give it a 9 out of 10. I'm not gonna say it's perfect. I know, because in my heart, I see movies that make me feel better, and I like it better than the Odyssey. I could name, like, for example, The Sheep Detectives or Project Hail Mary as one of the some of the standouts, or Exit 8 I also really, really like. And there's some others that I had to remember that I was like, hey, I love this, or oh, I didn't like this one. But for its ambition, I will say that, yeah, this one comes into my kind of like one of my top 10 best movies of the year. I'll have to measure that at the end of the year. But if you're curious, check it out. I'm not gonna stop you. If you want to see a big spectacle, and you don't mind a little bit of the pretentiousness of Christopher Nolan, it is worth seeing on the big screen. And well, nobody can blame you.